This episode of the Beauty Industry podcast was brought to you by Dermatonic Skincare. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Beauty Industry podcast, your online support community for the professional beauty industry, connecting you with educational pieces, innovative industry products, and inspiration from industry experts. I am your host, founding director of Beauty Industry, Tamara Shaw. If you love skin and learning, then today's guest is going to be the perfect episode for you. My guest today needs no introduction, as many of you probably know her as a household industry name, Chiza Westcarr. Chiza has an incredible resume history and industry experience, including completing her Bachelor of Health Sciences in Dermal Clinical Therapies, her master's degree in human nutrition, an advanced diploma in nutritional medicine, as well as certificates across health coaching, metabolic balance, and becoming a GAPS practitioner. She is also a dermal clinician and educator herself, a health coach, and the founder of the Nutritional Skincare Academy, whose mission it is to empower skin specialists with vital and innovative tools to obtain outstanding and long-lasting results for their clients. I've been waiting to find the perfect conversational topic to feature Chiza on this podcast, and when I saw discussion around treating clients on the higher end of the Fitzpatrick scale on her blog, I knew this would be a fantastic episode to verbalise for you and to create awareness around. Chiza shares with us how to treat, precautions, and advice on the higher Fitzpatrick and above clients, which I am so sure you are going to love listening to. From the Nutritional Skincare Academy, today we welcome Chiza Westcarr. Welcome to the podcast, Chiza. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Tamara, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
It is all my pleasure. So we are here to talk about treating and understanding the higher end of the Fitzpatrick scale when it comes to skin. However, I would love for you to share your journey through the industry before we get into our topic today.
I would love to. I have actually been in the industry since 1996. I was lucky enough to have worked on cruise ships. I've had my own little mobile beauty business. And after coming back to Australia, having been away for 7 years, I was in the UK where I did my beauty therapy course and then went to work on ships and then went to Papua New Guinea and set up a mobile business. Came back to Australia 7 years later with the hope of setting up my own day spa. And I looked around and saw that there were day spas everywhere that had all been bankrolled by big business. And I did not. So that took care of that idea. But being someone with Cedesco qualifications, I looked up beauty schools and I found one on George Street here in Sydney called the Strand Beauty College, or the Strand College of Beauty Therapy. And I contacted them and I went and had an interview with the then principal, Narelle Blinman, and I got a job teaching. And I was there for 2 years. I then moved on to teach at Dermalogica for 2 years and then was invited back to the Strand as college principal. I was there for 1 year before I moved into medical aesthetics. And I ended up being a trainer with advanced skin technology for 11 years. I went from being New South Wales state trainer to the national training manager, and then I moved into a global role. And those 11 years, I think, really made me decide that I wanted to do something in my own right for the industry. And that led to me leaving AST and setting up the Nutritional Skincare Academy, because what I saw was a really big gap in the market. And to me, the link that was missing was the role that nutrition played in the skin conditions that us as clinicians were faced with. And so my academy has been going for a year now. And what I do is educate skin therapists in all their guises. So medical aesthetic practitioners, nurse aestheticians or nurses involved in aesthetic practice, dermal clinicians, beauty therapists. So anyone who has an interest in skin and sort of wants to know how nutrition impacts skin, they enroll in my classes. And I just love it. So that's my journey so far. My focus now is just growing the academy, but I'm also very fortunate because I work as a nutritionist. I went out and I did a master's degree in human nutrition, and then also I did an advanced diploma in nutritional medicine, and I work as a nutritionist as well as run my academy. So yeah, very lucky and very happy in what I'm doing.
Busy lady.
Very, very busy, but very happy.
So I was 6 when you first started in the industry. So you have years and years of experience up your sleeve, which is absolutely incredible. And we also share that we both studied and worked on a cruise ship. So it's quite an expansive and life-changing role, isn't it?
Hard work, but lots of fun.
That's exactly right. And so 11 years at AST, which is absolutely incredible. I don't think the lifespan of a beauty therapist is that long anymore, let alone staying in the one role for 11 years. So you've certainly done well there. And now on to the Nutritional Skincare Academy. So you mentioned there that it was a gap in the market. Obviously, these days now, a lot of people are talking about nutrition. How was the landscape of nutrition and skincare education when you wanted to create the Nutritional Skincare Academy?
The landscape was almost non-existent, to be honest with you. And that's the reason why I decided to branch out. We had at AST brought in a nutritional supplement line. And honestly, it gave me a new lease of life because it really spoke to me and it validated what I knew was missing. And going into clinics and training therapists on this missing link, you could see their eyes light up. You could see that they got that there was something missing, that they weren't always getting the results that they'd hoped for with their topical preparations that they were recommending for clients to use at home and with their in-clinic treatments. And even though, you know, it's funny because even though we learn as therapists about all the body systems, and in some cases we learn about nutrition as a separate unit, there is no crossing over. There is no marrying of both of them, you know, and even at tertiary level, nutrition is only starting to be taught as it is linked to skin conditions. So there are a few tertiary degrees out there at the moment that are now starting to look at the link between the two rather than teaching nutrition as a standalone unit. And I just feel that as therapists, knowing as much as we do about the body, you can't look at nutrition and not bring that into the conversation. And yet, sadly, therapists are very nervous about doing that because they feel that they're sort of stepping over their mark or practicing outside of their scope if they do talk about nutrition. And that's what the Academy is all about. It's enabling therapists to have that very easy conversation, but doing it the right way without putting, you know, sort of pretending to be something that they're not.
And I love how you've said there, when you see therapists have that understanding of how nutrition can influence the skin, they have this almost light bulb, deer in headlights moment, and then they're almost cross over to this whole other world of the industry. I remember talking to a therapist about pigmentation, for example, and she had a client who had a lot of pigment. It was both dermal and epidermal. And I was saying to her, well, have you asked about her lifestyle, what she's doing every day? What are her main meals? Is she snacking? You know, what time is she eating? All of these kind of things. And she looked at me and was just baffled and just couldn't understand why I would be asking her had she asked her client. And so after a little bit of education, it was almost like she was just transformed and she just wanted to dig further and further. But it still astounds me that, you know, all these years later in the industry, now only we're talking about nutrition.
I know. And yet we know that doctors, before they, I'm thinking about plastic surgeons, for example, who are about to perform surgery on a patient, will ask them to change their diet, get rid of essential fatty acids, for example, because we know that can affect the clotting process. You know, we see ourselves that smokers' skin is not healthy skin. You know, we see how dull and how lifeless that skin is. You know, we know that eating poorly affects wound healing. And if we're in clinic performing treatments on clients that are invasive, or when I say invasive, that are that drive inflammation, for example, even though it's temporary inflammation or acute inflammation, we know that wound healing can be impacted. So to me, it's a no-brainer that we need to look at what our clients are eating in order to get the best results for them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I can hear how passionate you are about education. What is it about education and training and helping others that kind of makes your heart sing?
Tamara, I think when you mentioned me saying how therapists' eyes light up when they learn something new, I think that is what drives me. I think empowering through education is the biggest reason I do what I do. You know, I find that the more people that we educate or we empower, the better our industry becomes. So it's about really getting our industry to be a credible industry where we are all following best practice. And so I know through my academy, I'll get one or two, people who then go back to their clinics and affect so many more because they're actually working on, their clients and making a difference in their clients' lives. So the empowerment, I think, for me is my biggest driver, making a difference to people who then make a difference to people. Yes.
And it does have that knock-on effect when you have that connection with a therapist. They go back and it's almost like they are just singing your song for you. They want to tell everyone, including their colleagues and their manager and their family and their clients as well. So it's a pretty phenomenal role to be in.
And I think, it warms my heart when I then get the phone call or the email saying, oh my gosh, Chiza, I did what you said. And she was amazed, or she bought, or whatever. It's I guess that I'm almost like a parent, whose child has done well. And, that feeling of pride, but also just happy for the therapist who in the client's eyes has now become an expert. It's all that empowerment that I mentioned before that really pleases me.
I love that. And so let's talk about the blog post you wrote on treating Fitzpatrick 3 skins and above. Describe for us why you decided to put that content together so specifically and then titled it as you did.
It was a bit of a clickbait title, wasn't it?
It was great.
But I felt I had to. I like you I've been in the industry a long time, and for a long time I was the only person who looked like me, in an educational role in the industry. And I would sit by and attend seminars or go into clinics and hear from therapists what they'd been taught about a particular modality. And, hearing, for example, that microneedling can be done on all Fitzpatricks because it's colorblind, and then having to sort of go and educate why that was not quite true, that was always sort of something that I've had to contend with. But the reason why I wrote the blog, what white estheticians need to know about working with dark-skinned clients, is because I happen to be in many groups on Facebook, many esthetician groups on Facebook, and there was one in particular that has 11,000 clinicians or therapists in the group. And this is an American group, and a white esthetician had asked the question in the group following an incident that had happened in her beauty school. Now, this esthetician was actually a trainee esthetician, so she was in her final year of beauty school. And she had brought her black friend in for a treatment, just, as you do, free treatments. It's more of a practicing opportunity for the students. And so she brought her black friend in for a treatment. And the instructor had turned her black friend away. And she had explained that she wasn't able to do a treatment on her or have her have a treatment because she didn't want to risk damaging her skin. And that was the way that it was explained. And so This white esthetician was mortified, and her black friend was embarrassed and I guess a bit humiliated as well. And so this therapist trainee had come into the group to ask the question, guys, this is what's just happened. Was it racist? because, and what she said was, I know as a beauty therapist trainee that there are treatments that I could have done on her. And for this teacher to have said what she did, I'm not sure how to read it. And what surprised me, Tamara, was the reaction, because it was split down the middle.
Right.
You had as many raging, angry estheticians in the group going, racist, it was racist, how dare she, this is 2019, you know. And then you had as many saying, no, I would have done exactly the same thing. No, there was nothing wrong with what she did. And I sat there reading these comments thinking, oh my gosh, now here's a teaching moment. So I hopped into the group and I did a Facebook Live. And I introduced myself. Now, obviously, I'm Australian, they're American, but we're all estheticians. We're all, you know, so we all have the same goal. So in my live, I explained that I actually didn't think that she was being racist. But what I identified was that here was an instructor who was clearly only used to working on Fitzpatrick's 1 to 3. And I didn't think she had any experience with darker skins. And so she was playing it safe. But what I also said was that was no excuse, absolutely no excuse, because as an instructor in this day and age, in the melting pot that America is, for you not to understand the nuances around working with higher Fitzpatricks as an instructor, absolutely inexcusable. It doesn't make sense to me, you know, not in this day and age. Come on now. And I then said I'd actually spoken on this very topic at a lot of dermatological conferences, and the response was always the same, with, you know, attendees coming up to me and saying, you know what, I found that so informative, because you're right, I have got no experience working on darker skins and I'm nervous too. So this was very, very insightful. And that's really why after the live, I thought, you know what, I'm going to blog about it as well. So I think that what showed up in the responses is very reflective of what we deal with here in Australia. You know, now, I mean, I was born here, and I have seen, you know, as I've grown older, the melting pot that Australia has become. You know, once upon a time, as a dark-skinned person, I'd see another dark person down the street, and I would chase them down the street to find out who they were, or, you know, and having my girlfriends, if I sort of saw another black person on the street, we'd smile at each other, sort of like a knowing smile. My friend would say, did you know him, or do you know her? I'm like, no, it's a black thing. But you know, it's changed now. You know, you've got so many more people of different ethnic mixes, you know, happily calling Australia home, having been born here, but still being scared to go into clinics because they don't feel that the white therapists are going to know what to do with their skin. And I just think it's inexcusable. As a therapist, it's inexcusable. Not in today's society where you've got so many mixes all living here harmoniously.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And I think it's a lot of the time the fear, and even being an educator in the past myself, it is a whitewash in the classroom. You know, it is mostly Fitzpatrick 1 or 2. You might get occasional kind of, well, specifically in Queensland and in Melbourne, I saw is a little bit different in Sydney, a little bit more ethnicity come into play, but it is just a fear because the educator doesn't know how to treat higher Fitzpatrick, therefore they're not articulating that to the therapist. So it's almost ignorant on both behalves, and especially, as you said, if you are an educator, it is your due diligence to understand how to treat all types of the Fitzpatrick scale.
And I guess because I'm a dark-skinned person, I felt that I had to say something, because, you know, most of these, when you think of in-clinic modalities, most of these modalities are being trained on by Caucasian-skinned educators who have no experience with darker skins, you know. And so, and I've been in clinic. What I didn't mention is that I also work as a dermal therapist. So I work as a nutritionist dermal therapist, and I have my academy. And I've been in clinic and had, you know, a laser specialist come in to talk about a particular laser. And as soon as I ask whether I can have a treatment, you can see the look of fear in their eyes and nervousness. oh, well, actually, no, it's only ever been tested on Fitzpatrick's 1 to 4, perhaps, and it's almost like anything higher doesn't exist. And that's pretty reflective when you think of it, of, the attitude generally. Now, I am being generalist when I say this, but it's almost like anything higher is irrelevant or doesn't exist. And so we therefore become muzzled, and we just go along with it because we've got no choice. But in this case, we do have a choice. And as a dark-skinned person, I'm here to tell you that there are many treatments that a dark-skinned client can have, safely have, if only the prep is done beforehand.
Yes, absolutely agree. Let's just step back to basics. I'm sure everyone who is listening, I hope everyone who is listening understands the Fitzpatrick scale, but just for people who maybe are afraid to say that they don't know what it is, or they might feel silly asking the question, can you just give us more of kind of a visual explanation of the Fitzpatrick scale?
I'd be happy to. And, one of the things I always say when I teach is, there's no such thing as a silly question. We're all here to learn and to empower. And some of us have more experience than others, but, we're all wanting to do the best for our clients. And so the Fitzpatrick scale is a scale that's used in dermatology to grade the different types of skin colors based on their reaction to UV radiation. And the response to UV radiation is relevant to us as clinicians because it will tell us what the risks of certain treatments are on a client based on their colouring. So it goes from types 1 all the way down to type 6. And a type 1 would be a very fair-skinned person who, with any kind of UV exposure, will burn. This person never tans, so they will burn. Their skin will become erythematous, so they'll have the redness showing, and then they will develop freckling as a way of the skin trying to protect itself against UV radiation. And so think of a redhead. And then we have a Fitzpatrick type 2, and this would be someone who would burn, but then usually tan slightly. And then we have a 3, and a 3 is someone whose first response to UV exposure would be to tan. But then if they spend a lot of time in the sun, they will burn, but then they will tan more deeply. And then a 4 would be someone, typically more of a Mediterranean type skin. So this person is tan pretty much all year round. They can darken, but, that sort of Mediterranean. And when I say Mediterranean, I've got to be careful because you've got your fair and your darker types. But this person is someone who is usually olive skinned all year round. That will darken if they're in the sun, but they usually remain olive. And then a 5 is someone who is chocolate brown. This person would normally be, I always think of people, sort of from the subcontinent. So you have someone who is sort of, I'm a Fitzpatrick. Okay, sorry, I'm jumping the gun. So a 5 would be a lighter chocolate. So this person, once again, always tans. What amuses me is that the 5s and the 6s are usually people who are of a darker skin type, and for both of them, the category typically says they never burn. Now, I'm here to tell you, as a Fitzpatrick 6, which is the most pigmented a person can be, and in Fitzpatrick 6, there are people who are darker again than I am. But as a Fitzpatrick 6 phototype, I scuba dive, and I have been burned. So we don't typically burn, but if we're outside all day on a hot day, we will burn, absolutely. And also, end up with some shedding from the burn as well. So we peel, but it's not something that you will find happens commonly, but it absolutely is possible. So these categories that go from 1 to 6, we normally start at 3. And we call 3, 4s, 5s, and 6s, we call them skins at risk. And the reason we call this category skins at risk is because anything from a 3 and higher runs the risk of post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation from treatments that are done in clinic. Now, most doctors, if they are looking at this Fitzpatrick phototype, tend to work from 1 to 3 as being skins that are at no risk, and then 4, 5s, and 6s are skins that are at risk. I put 3s in there because, as you heard me sort of stumbling before when I was talking about Mediterranean types, you can have an Italian person who is very fair with blonde hair and blue eyes, and you can have an Italian person who is quite dark. And so with the Fitzpatrick 3 phototype, I look at high and low colouring in that group. But so that we don't miss any, I always recommend that a 3, 4, 5, and 6 are treated as skins that you want to be very careful with.
Yes, I love that explanation, and I like that you include Fitzpatrick 3 in the skins at risk, because as do I when I'm educating as well, in that a 3 can be a lighter 3 who pigments pink, for example, or it can be a darker 3 who pigments brown.
Absolutely.
So it's very difficult just to tell via eyesight what colour that a 3 is going to pigment, whereas a 4, 5, and 6, you basically know that the pigment is going to be brown.
But then what about, Tamara, what about someone who appears to be fair, that has a Japanese mother or a Maori father, for example? I've also come across that. And so what I do is, rather than get them to rely on the Fitzpatrick phototype, I actually ask them what their skin is like after they have either scratched it or been bitten by a mozzie, or, you know, sort of had some kind of trauma to it. Does it go pink and then does it fade to back to white, or are you left with a brown mark?
Perfect.
Sorry.
And that
no, that's
okay.
That, I think, is a better indication of what's going on than just looking at the Fitzpatrick phototype.
And so just asking the client, do you have a recent graze or scratch, or maybe you burnt yourself on the hair straightener or the oven or the iron, like I always do, and you know, actually having a visual, because sometimes I think clients don't know as well. If you said, you know, what color is it? Is it pink or brown? They have no idea themselves.
Absolutely. And so I think that just makes it a lot easier for them to be able to relate to when you ask that question.
We will be back with more of the Beauty Industry podcast after this short message from our sponsors. Are you looking for home care for your clients with melasma? Dermatonics Melasma Care is a unique, patent-protected nutridermaceutical packed with naturally active ingredients specifically formulated for the care of your client's skin with melasma. Find out more by emailing info@dermatonics.com.au. And so you were talking there about post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. This is obviously a complication that can occur when treating the Fitzpatrick 3 and above the skins at more risk. Can you just describe for us exactly what that is?
So post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation comes about where the skin has undergone trauma. Now, in a Caucasian skin, trauma is usually indicated by erythema. And once the erythema dissipates, once the skin goes through its wound healing process, goes through 3 very distinct phases, the inflammatory, the proliferative, and the remodeling phase. Once that all happens, the skin returns to its normal color, which is, you know, white. But in a higher Fitzpatrick phototype, with any kind of trauma, you have the inflammation. So that inflammatory phase where you will actually see redness on that skin. Now, if the client is of a higher Fitzpatrick, then that may not be obvious, but the erythema is still present. Now, a lot of people will find when they do treatments in clinic that maybe they've done laser, or they might have done needling or a chemical peel. They might have the client ring back in a day or two and say, oh my God, my pigment's worsened. And I always say, that pigment has not worsened. What they are seeing is inflammation that has caused the existing pigment to darken. But that phase where pigment actually is produced hasn't occurred yet. So once the skin has gone through the inflammatory phase, it then moves into the proliferative phase. Now, you will then see, if the skin has not been treated properly beforehand, you will then see pigmentation resulting. So, for example, if I sort of scratch or cut myself, the pigment doesn't appear immediately because the skin has to go through those phases of wound healing. But one of the things that is triggered from inflammation is the melanocyte. And so when proliferative phase occurs, apart from the keratinocytes sort of moving in and what's the word I'm looking for? The keratinocytes move in and they restore that homeostasis. But underneath, you've also got collagen remodeling, etc., occurring. Now, in the process, as those new cells move in to repair that injury, the melanocytes also move in. And so on a darker skin, one of the things that you will see is once the inflammation goes, that you are now dealing with pigment that wasn't previously there. And so any treatment that is done in clinic on a high Fitzpatrick needs to have beforehand some prepping that occurs. And we talk about prepping being some pigment inhibiting ingredients. I always put in vitamin A. I always put in some hydrators as well, so that that skin is in its best condition, which will then enable it to be able to go through any treatment that you're doing and come out with a successful outcome.
So almost what you're saying there, when your client has pigment, or it seems to be pigment, the day or two or three, as we know, they're in the inflammatory stage. That's inflammatory pigment. However, it's transient. When you have pigment that occurs during the proliferative stage, which we know is beyond day 3 up to day 10, in the wound healing process, then that is post the inflammation. So then that is post-inflammatory hyperpigment, which can become a little bit more solidified.
Absolutely solidified and much harder to get rid of. Not that and so this is the thing. I think a lot of people get very scared that that pigment that has occurred post-treatment is going to be there forever. You can definitely find, not in all cases, but in most cases, that PIH, depending on, I guess, how much trauma was induced, will actually lessen and improve over time. So PIH is transient for the most part, but it does take a lot to get rid of it. And so if you've had a client come in to see you in all good faith, thinking that you're the expert, and you haven't prepared her skin effectively, and she ends up with PIH, you've lost her. But worse, you might also, be on a current affair. God forbid.
That's Australians' worst nightmare, isn't it? Going on a current affair.
It is. So I just think that as clinicians, we need to understand that there should not be any shortcuts. It always baffles me when client therapists will say, "Oh, well, they're not gonna buy all that." When I recommend prepping, they would rather buy all that if they had the option than have the PIH at the end of the treatment. So it's all in how you explain it, I think, Tamara.
And I think realizing as therapists, I call some therapists cowboy or cowgirl therapists, because with all real respect, you may be trained across a few different product ranges or a few different modalities, but every range and every ingredient and every modality is so different. And for example, I'll use needling. So I know a lot of therapists who treat in circular motions with needling. Which in my opinion, I've seen post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation occur from that. And then when they come and you teach them, okay, we're going to do horizontal or vertical lines, they just want to go straight into what they know in doing circles. And you have to realize that there are different procedures and protocols because there has been evidence of causing pigment, trauma pigment. So not to jump on the high horse and kind of think you know everything. No matter how many years of experience you have, you always still need to take everything as a learning opportunity and follow the guidelines.
Absolutely, and that's us as educators as well. We're always learning. We're always updating and upgrading our skills because things change. As we learn, as we know more, then we make changes. You've got to take it on, but I think so definitely so do therapists.
You were talking before about the inflammatory stage, and I know when we are dealing with inflammation, obviously in a Fitzpatrick 1, 2, or 3, it's very, very easy to see consistent erythema, which we normally point to as the clinical endpoint. how can we see the clinical endpoint when it's a little bit more difficult in a higher Fitzpatrick? And when does the therapist know the difference between a safe treatment and then over-treating perhaps?
Well, I think that when looking at a higher Fitzpatrick, my rule of thumb is always to just go in gently. I think that there is a real misconception around darker skins that they somehow must be tougher skins. And I've actually asked, my students, I'll give a scenario where I put, a Fitzpatrick 3 or a Fitzpatrick 2 person next to a Fitzpatrick 6 person, same age, same lifestyles. And I asked them which of the two skins, what the two skins would show, as a result of lifestyle. And it's really interesting that the responses that come back, because what the responses show me is that they've got no idea how a dark skin responds to anything, really. And so with treatments, I think, first of all, you've got to have an understanding of what treatments are effective on a dark skin. And it's really important that we don't put everybody into the same basket and treat them all as one. It's important to understand that there are nuances and there are definitely differences between the two. And so with a dark skin that you're treating, you ask what the endpoints would be. My question to you would be, what are we talking about? Are we talking about chemical peels? Are we talking about needling? Are we talking about microdermabrasion? Because with chemical peels, there are certain peels that should not be done on a dark skin. I've been on forums where they're talking about doing a Jesna on a Fitzpatrick 5 or 6, and I'm thinking, but why would you? Why would you do that? And so I go in and very gently educate that you run the risk of hyperpigmentation with that treatment where it's a true Jesna. And so depending on the color of that skin, Tamara, there may be some erythema that shows through, or the skin may even appear darker where there is erythema underneath it, because you've got the pigmentation and then the erythema making it appear darker. But I think what I would say is that it's important for therapists to know the sorts of treatments that they can and can't do, and then work within whatever the guidelines are. So each device that comes out would have certain guidelines. And if they're not teaching about higher Fitzpatricks, well, then attend classes or courses that do. It's not enough to say, oh, well, I didn't know that, or I wasn't taught that. There is so much out there education-wise that we can tap into more than ever before. So, like I said, it depends on what the treatment is. I'll give you an example. I have therapists who are freaked out about doing a salicylic acid peel on anything higher than a Fitzpatrick 4 because they feel that it's going to cause PIH. And I explain to them that salicylic acid is actually an anti-inflammatory peel. Despite it being as fiery hot as it is, it actually has an anti-inflammatory action in the skin, coming from the same family as aspirin. But before they do that peel on an acne skin that's a higher Fitzpatrick that requires a salicylic acid peel, they need to make sure that they have prepped that skin appropriately using tyrosinase inhibitors, melanin transfer inhibitors, antioxidants, hydration, some vitamin A. Get that skin well prepared and you won't have a problem.
Amazing. And I think as well, just as therapists, we are all what I call resurfacing junkies. We just want to do the most resurfacing, the highest treatment, the deepest needle, and we just want to do it now. I think some therapists limit themselves as they don't want to start the client at point A and then go through the whole alphabet to get to point Z. They just want to go to Z straight away, and I think sometimes we need to actually respect the skin and respect its wound healing process and the fact that it is a living organ, the largest organ, in fact, and that we need to work clients up through a journey and through a pathway. And this is why you have series and treatment plans and all of this kind of thing in your menu. It's not just so that the business can sell $600 worth of needling packages or peel packages. It's actually to get the best results for the client.
And I think that's key, getting the best result for the client. A lot of clinics will have a cookie cutter type of methodology where everybody gets the same thing. And once they've had this, then they go on to have that. You've got to, first of all, remember that there's a person inside that skin. And you really are trying to get the best outcome for whatever the concern is. There are some skins that don't need anything more than say, a very superficial treatment. I actually go through and I classify the treatments we do into what I call very superficial, which is just stratum corneum, down to superficial, which is down to the basal layer of the epidermis. And then I look at your deep peels or your medium depth peels, because we don't do deep, your medium depth peels, which move into the dermis. Now, they're the three categories that we work on when we look at trying to manage skin conditions. And we need to be mindful of exactly what it is we're trying to do. Microdermabrasion is stratum corneum targeted. Now, it does have, because you've got cell-to-cell communication, it does have a remodeling effect in the dermis when it's done long-term. And I only found this out when I did my Vic Uni degree. I didn't realize that you had long-term stimulation of collagen and elastin in the dermis with just micro. But I have actually seen a microdermabrasion tool being used almost like a surgical implement, where the esthetician has gone in really, really harshly and actually caused abrasion to the skin. And, they've caused PIH from microderm, which should not happen. Wow. So I think it's a matter of looking at the skin, working out exactly where the condition is located in the skin, and then deciding on your modalities based on that.
I couldn't agree more. And as you're saying there, respecting the device and understanding that there's a person in the skin. I love that. I think when I was working for a company, they didn't have any treatment programs or packages. And the therapist would always say to me, Tamara, I don't know what to prescribe. I don't know. Can you organize packages to be made? Can you create series? Can you create treatment journeys? And it worries me that therapists don't have the autonomy to do that. Some therapists, obviously not all therapists, but we should be always customizing and creating bespoke, unique skin packages. And as you said, it shouldn't really be a cookie cutter. Here is 6 of one peel and then come back. It should be every single time I'm going to look at the skin. What are the epigenetics? What are the lifestyle factors you've been doing since you've seen me last? And how can I then tailor that to get the best result from today's treatment?
Absolutely. Can I tell you something that really excites me, Tamara? It's the fact that the skin microbiome is now becoming a focal point. And that is where my interest is going. And I think that we're going to find that people are going to be questioning more what's being done to their skin and the impact on the skin, because that's what drives, change in the industry. The patient learns more about different things, and then they come to ask us and to challenge us about it. Look at the way our products have been cleaned up, as far as ingredients go. No one wants any of the nasties anymore. But once upon a time, all of our products were bought based on how they smelt and how they looked, the color of them. And that's gone now, and even preservatives themselves are being questioned. Well, it's coming to a time where our clients are going to be asking us exactly what we're using on the skin and how supportive of the skin's microbiome those products are. Watch this space.
It's an exciting time to be a part of the industry, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is.
So you were talking before about prepping the skin. So you talked a little bit about ingredients there. How long would you suggest is a safe amount of time to prep, and what kind of specifics can we go into with regards to ingredients?
That's a great question. So I think that prepping, I think all skins should be prepped with some vitamin A and some antioxidants and, obviously good sunscreen before they, a treatment is done. But when you are looking at managing potential PIH risks, then I think that a pigment inhibitor and a melanin transfer inhibitor like niacinamide should be added to the mix. And I would normally say Fitzpatrick 3 to 4, I would say 2 weeks. A Fitzpatrick higher than a 4, I would say you're looking now at about 4 weeks. Some people who are nervous will push it to 6 weeks. There's no harm in doing that. But I think if they are religiously using the products for 4 weeks, they're good to go.
Amazing. And is there anything internal advice-wise for prepping we should tell the clients?
Inflammation drives pigment. So, looking at foods that are drivers of inflammation can worsen pigment. But there's also, so looking at diet and really sort of looking at making sure that vegetables are the mainstay of your diet, and, getting rid of well, not getting rid of, because that's not realistic, but really sort of just being conscious of the amount of refined processed foods that are being consumed. Alcohol is a big driver. People don't think of alcohol, but it is, and it's unfortunately part of our Australian lifestyle. But then we have conditions that are worsened by it that we then have to manage. So that's definitely a discussion to have with clients. So dietary modification, but there is also, and unfortunately as therapists we don't have access to this, but there's a particular medication, I think you can call it, called tranexamic acid. And tranexamic acid is applied both topically to the skin, but also taken orally. And it has been shown to have dramatic results on melasma. So, so that was doing the rounds in a lot of conferences on pigmentation, this wonder drug. Now, I don't know what the side effects are, because, there are always side effects with medication. But yes, from a dietary perspective, I would just say really focus on getting the client to reduce those foods that are pro-inflammatory. And they're all the things that, you find in places like your fast food joints and your supermarkets in packets.
Amazing. And so I think the common theme throughout this episode and your blog, and by the sounds of it, the conversation that was had in that group, is the fear of therapists not knowing how to treat, just being overcautious, not being educated on how to treat. How can we overcome the fear?
I think the easiest way to overcome the fear is to look at it as an opportunity to learn, right? When you think of how we started out in beauty school, not knowing anything about the body, and then by the end of our course having a really good understanding of the contraindications of certain types of treatments that we perform on clients, we've got to go back to the basics and you put your hand up and you say, I've got no idea, but I want to know. Because I do see these clients coming into my clinic, and it embarrasses me that I've got no idea what to do. So all I do is an enzyme treatment. I say, look at what's out there. My Nutritional Academy, Nutritional Skincare Academy, I offer classes, I offer webinars on, I've got one called Managing Pigmentation Risks in Ethnic Skin. So it's just going out and finding information that is available. I know that there's another academy. I'm trying to think. Nancy Abdu's, is it laser and dermal?
Oh yes,
laser and dermal.
Yes, dermal and laser.
Is it
Tadley?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I feel so embarrassed. I can't even remember what it's called. But Tadley does some fantastic education, and I think what gives me confidence is that the educators, for the most part, are higher Fitzpatricks. So they know what they're talking about, and they, rather than giving you a textbook explanation, they're actually telling you what to do because they have experienced it, they've lived it. And so I just think, embrace the fear, but do something about it.
Amazing. I've just written the acronym Tadley down. It's the Australian Dermal and Laser Institute.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, Nancy, if you listen to this, and Kayati. They're amazing girls and they do amazing things, and I should know it. But yeah, that's a great place to start with them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I love that you've mentioned your classes as well. So for anyone who doesn't know the Skincare Academy, talk about where you're located, what you do on a bigger, wider scale, and where we can find out more.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tamara. So I am actually online, and I used to have a face-to-face presence where I'd travel around Australia. I did that last year. But what I found was that I wasn't always able to get to the smaller towns, or, sort of go as far afield as I would like. And so what I thought that I would do differently this time is to bring it online. So I've got two main courses that I run. I've got my foundation course, which is an 8-week course, and I have my introductory course. And both of these courses focus on looking at how nutrition is linked to skin health. But the foundation course is for people who are sort of more advanced, who have some kind of understanding. And the introductory course is a 4-week course. Now, it used to be my 2-day face-to-face. It's now a 4-week online course. Now, both of these courses I do live. I do over a 4 and an 8-week period, 2 hours on a Monday live. And what I find is that clinicians love this because unlike a course that you sign up for that's online that you can go back to any time, you have to attend this because I'm live. And then you have the recordings that you can then go back and review as you please. So I've found that this works really well. And I've got people, excuse me, in the UK and in the US and in New Zealand and Tasmania that have joined, whereas previously I wasn't always able to have them along for obvious reasons. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
And my socials?
And what are your, socials, please?
So on Facebook, I have the Nutritional Skincare Academy. My nutritional consultancy is called Glow Skin and Nutrition. On Insta, Nutritional Skincare Academy has the in front of it, so it's the Nutritional Skincare Academy, and Glow Skin and Nutrition is my consulting business.
Amazing. It makes it hard, all the different platforms, to have one consistent name, doesn't it?
It does. But they're two that I'm most active on. I'm trying to get better, but geez, Tamara, it's hard. Posting regularly, etc. But yeah, no, I love the interest that I'm getting. So hopefully I can get a few more along.
Fantastic. I will put all of those little notes in the podcast show notes, as well as linking all of your Facebook and social media and Instagram and the website and everything along as we publish this one live. So thank you so much for all of that information. It's been an absolute pleasure and really eye-opening to, hear from a Fitzpatrick 6 to a 2, I'm a 2, to kind of hear about how to treat and the safety around treating and knowing when and where and what to treat. It's been really amazing having you on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Tamara. I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
How was that? That was just absolutely incredible. I think sometimes as therapists, we don't know what we don't know. And perhaps you didn't know that you didn't know how to treat a higher Fitzpatrick skin type. Or maybe if you did know how to treat a higher Fitzpatrick skin type, you've learned something a little bit extra that made you want to continue your study and further investigate the wound healing response and post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. I know it certainly made me feel that way. One thing I took away from the conversation was something that Chiza said: the more we educate people and empower people, the better our industry comes. And I could not agree more. And I'm going to leave you on that little sentiment today. Until next time, stay connected.